some of this was AI generated.
Indeed. Because how can we know that it's not?
I don't think she fully understood or was even interested in what the role was supposed to become.
Now, after years of speculation, new evidence, from official documents to insider testimony, is forcing everyone to look again at what really happened when Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor entered the world. If you think this was just an innocent mix-up, think again, because the more you pull at the threads, the clearer it becomes that Meghan and Harry were hiding something much bigger than privacy. But before we jump to conclusions, let's rewind to the first red flag that no one could ignore. Royal births usually unfold like clockwork. A labor announcement is issued, the palace confirms when the baby arrives, and an official medical bulletin follows. It's a process built on transparency and consistency because the monarchy understands one simple truth: people want to feel included. But with Archie, nothing followed the script. In fact, by the time the palace announced that Meghan was in labor, Archie had already been born. Hours before. Not just a few minutes. Hours. Some outlets insisted the birth happened at 5:26 a.m. Others swore it was 2:26 a.m. And while skeptics were dismissed as nitpickers, even royal insiders admitted privately that the timing was baffling. This was simply a clerical error. Why did no one correct it? Why were there no matching records to confirm the birth time? The confusion wasn't trivial, it was the first domino. Because if you can't get the moment of birth right, what else might be wrong? You'd expect the birth of a royal baby to leave a clear paper trail. Hospital logs, witness statements, photographic evidence of arrival and departure. But in Archie's case, none of that surfaced. No credible photo ever emerged showing Meghan entering the Portland hospital. Not a single trusted medical professional came forward to say, "Yes, I delivered this child." And when reporters reached out to confirm basic details, their questions were met with silence, or worse, vague deflections. That absence of proof created exactly the kind of vacuum where rumors thrive. If Meghan had simply been photographed arriving, or if a doctor had signed a public statement, the speculation might have died in its cradle. Instead, the public was left to connect the dots themselves, and every blank space looked suspicious. And when people looked closer, the evidence got even stranger. Nothing set fire to the conspiracy theories faster than one now infamous image. A Getty photo that appeared to show a pregnant belly shifting in a way that didn't look remotely human. Some called it an optical illusion. Others insisted it had been digitally manipulated. Getty defended the authenticity of the photo. But the image was so bizarre that even people who dismissed surrogacy rumors at first began to wonder, could this be a clue? Theories about a surrogate carrying Archie had existed on the fringes of social media, but Meghan and Harry's choice to say nothing at all, no denial, no explanation, turned a fringe theory into an unstoppable wildfire. In their silence, people felt they'd been given permission to speculate. And speculate they did. Still, nothing prepared the public for what came next. Most royals issue a birth certificate within days, fully transparent. William and Kate's certificates listed everything down to the attending physician. The details were clear, verifiable, and left no room for debate. Archie's certificate read more like a redacted memo. First, it was delayed. Then, when it finally appeared, Meghan's full legal name, Rachel Meghan Markle, had been erased. In its place stood only her royal title. And that wasn't the only oddity. The certificate had no signature from a doctor, no stamp verifying the hospital's role, nothing that proved beyond doubt where, when, or how Archie was born. Why strip Meghan's name? Why leave the certificate half-complete? The palace offered a mealy-mouthed statement blaming standard formatting, but nobody bought it. Because if it was standard, why had no royal certificate looked like this before? And if that felt suspicious, the photo rollout was downright surreal. Tradition says you walk out those hospital doors within a day or two, baby in arms, grinning through the exhaustion. It's a rite of passage. William and Kate did it 3 times. Charles and Diana did it before them. But Meghan and Harry, they skipped it. Instead, 2 days later, they staged a photo shoot inside Windsor Castle. No hospital staff. No candid family moments. No emotion. Just flawless lighting and stiff body language, like a catalog shoot nobody wanted to be in. Viewers sensed it immediately. This wasn't a family savoring their first hours together. It was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to control the narrative. Instead of reassuring the public, it pushed them further away. But even that wasn't the final piece of this bizarre puzzle. If you think the inconsistencies ended after Archie was introduced, think again. Because over the next 2 years, Meghan and Harry began rewriting the story over and over. In their Oprah interview, Meghan claimed Archie was denied a royal title because of his race. But royal historians quickly pointed out that wasn't accurate. Under established protocols, Archie wasn't entitled to the title at birth. In the Netflix series, they insisted the palace fueled surrogacy rumors to smear them. But they didn't address the missing records, the contradictory birth times, or the altered certificate. It was a strategy of selective storytelling, emphasize victimhood, skip over details. But every time they left out facts, they gave people another reason to doubt them, which left only one question: was any of it real? As technology advanced, skeptics raised a new possibility. What if some of the images weren't just staged, but artificially generated? For all the photos looked too perfect. No blemishes, no wrinkles, no spontaneous moments. The infamous Getty image seemed to defy physics. Could parts of Meghan's pregnancy imagery have been manipulated by AI or enhanced to smooth inconsistencies? While there's no conclusive proof, the theory isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. In an age of deepfakes, a perfect photo isn't always a truthful one. And that brings us to the most explosive allegation of all. When you strip away the carefully curated PR, you're left with a story full of gaps. Conflicting birth times, no photos of Meghan arriving or leaving the hospital, an edited birth certificate, a photo shoot so sterile it felt inhuman, and a silence so complete it practically invited speculation. But could a surrogate have carried Archie? No one outside the inner circle can say for sure. But the Sussexes' refusal to offer clear evidence or even a simple statement of reassurance has left a stain on their credibility that may never fade. In the absence of transparency, what are people supposed to believe? This wasn't just a PR mishap. It was a masterclass in how secrecy breeds suspicion. If Meghan and Harry had simply chosen honesty over control, this story could have ended years ago. Instead, every half-truth, every delayed announcement, every staged photo became fuel for a fire that still burns today. Because when you build your reputation on authenticity, you can't cherry-pick which truths to share. So here's the question only you can answer. Do you trust their version of events? Or do you think the real story of Archie's birth is still hidden behind palace walls? But to understand why this single birth triggered such a colossal storm, you have to go back to how the British royal family has always handled new arrivals. For generations, these moments were a delicate balance between public duty and personal joy. When Princess Diana walked out of St. Mary's Hospital with baby William, the scene was unscripted in the best way. Her shy smile, Charles's nervous glances, the unmistakable vulnerability of new parents. People loved them for it. They felt included. They felt trusted. Decades later, when William and Kate had their own children, they repeated the tradition almost identically. Cameras clicked, reporters cheered, and millions around the world tuned in live. No one was forced to guess when the baby had been born or whether the child in the mother's arms was truly theirs. The rituals were old-fashioned, but they worked. They signaled transparency, stability, belonging. That's why when Harry and Meghan broke with every part of this routine, it wasn't just a casual departure from protocol. It felt to many like a calculated rejection of the public itself, as if they were saying, "This isn't your business anymore." And while privacy is any parent's right, the reality of royalty is different. Royals are not only individuals but living symbols, funded and elevated by public interest. So when Meghan and Harry decided to shield every detail, to shut out all but a single photographer and a hand-picked journalist, it wasn't surprising that people felt deliberately excluded. Didn't help that when the story finally trickled out, it was littered with inconsistencies and missing pieces. The message, whether intended or not, was unmistakable. Don't ask questions, just applaud. Of course, people did ask questions. Thousands of them. Why was the timeline so disjointed? Why did Meghan's bump sometimes look dramatically different from one appearance to the next? Why had the palace been so clumsy in its announcements? And why did Harry, usually the most approachable royal, suddenly retreat behind an iron curtain of scripted talking points? It's easy to dismiss all of this as tabloid gossip. But when you look closer, even respected journalists who'd covered the royal family for decades admitted in hushed tones that this was unlike anything they'd ever witnessed. It wasn't just the secrecy, it was the sense that Harry and Meghan were engineering a story in real time, testing which parts the public would accept and which would be quietly revised. And that strategy, if you can even call it a strategy, backfired spectacularly, because every attempt to downplay the confusion only magnified it. Every refusal to clarify only confirmed people's worst suspicions. The Sussexes had entered a game they could never win. Once the public senses you're hiding something, nothing you say sounds credible again. Consider the birth certificate. When it finally appeared, weeks after Archie's arrival, it should have been the definitive record that put speculation to rest. Instead, it was so strangely incomplete, so awkwardly edited, that it became the very document fueling the controversy. Why delete Meghan's name? Why omit the medical witness? Even if there was a perfectly reasonable explanation, their refusal to share it came across as contemptuous, as if the public didn't deserve the truth. The fallout was immediate and relentless. Social media exploded with theories, some plausible, some ridiculous. In private groups and Reddit threads, people combed through every archived news clip, every high-resolution photo, looking for evidence to support the idea that Meghan hadn't carried Archie at all. Some claimed they'd found it in the way she moved. Others insisted her wardrobe choices were designed to obscure a prosthetic bump. Palace, meanwhile, maintained a stony silence. And in that silence, the narrative spiraled further. Even supporters of Meghan and Harry began to feel uneasy. It was one thing to protect a child's privacy. It was another to dismantle the most time-honored royal traditions with no plan for what would replace them. When Meghan finally spoke out, first in carefully worded statements, later in the Oprah interview, she framed the issue as one of bigotry and institutional cruelty. And while many people sympathized with her experience, others couldn't ignore how neatly that story deflected from the simpler question: where was the proof? Where were the receipts that would have ended the speculation in a single afternoon? And here's the part that makes this whole saga so astonishing. If you strip away the palace intrigue and the Netflix documentaries, the issue is breathtakingly simple. A baby was born, and the parents refused to share the most basic, verifiable details about it. No clear timeline, no hospital confirmation, no signatures from doctors, no photos that felt spontaneous. Just a parade of choreographed images and half-answers. It's not hard to understand why people felt insulted. For generations, royal births were the ultimate unifying moment. No matter your politics, no matter your opinion of the monarchy, it was something everyone could witness together. This time, that trust was replaced with suspicion and, eventually, contempt. To this day, Harry and Meghan's defenders insist that the couple was merely protecting their family. That in an era of relentless media intrusion, they had no choice but to draw hard lines. But critics point out that there is a vast difference between protecting your child's safety and deliberately engineering confusion. If you don't want to share private details, don't share them, but don't share partial information and then attack the public for noticing the gaps. And while it's true the media sometimes crosses the line, it's also true that Harry and Meghan have consistently used that same media to shape their own narrative when it suits them. From exclusive interviews to glossy magazine spreads, they have never been shy about telling their side of the story, so long as it remains on their terms. When it comes to Archie's birth, their terms were simple. No questions, no verification, no deviation from the version they decided was acceptable. And that version, over time, began to look less like a protective gesture and more like a calculated campaign. Because if there's one thing the last decade has taught us, it's that public trust is not an unlimited resource. You can only ask people to suspend disbelief so many times before they stop listening altogether. And in the Sussexes case, that threshold was crossed long ago. Some observers have speculated that the true reason for the secrecy has nothing to do with scandal and everything to do with control. By breaking from tradition, Meghan and Harry were able to seize the narrative in a way no royal couple had ever attempted. They became the sole gatekeepers of information, the only voices allowed to speak with authority. For a while, that strategy worked. It won them sympathy, painted them as modernizers, made them look brave. But eventually the cracks showed, because when you demand that level of control, you also assume total responsibility for every inconsistency, every missing fact, every time the story changes. And if you don't account for those gaps, someone else will. So here we are, Years later, still debating the same question. What really happened on the day Archie was born? And why did Meghan and Harry work so hard to keep it hidden?